Today we will write a program for finding the maximum and minimum element in an array. So uh, before we begin, make sure you have a good understanding of arrays. So let's go through our program. Uh, First of all, as you know, our program will jump into the main method as soon as it runs. So let's see how it works. So first of all, I've created an object of the scanner class. I have called the object input, and then I have created three variables. So first off, I have max, which will store the maximum value. For now, it is empty, like it is zero. And then I have created min, which will store the minimum value. And then I have a variable called size, which will store the length of the array. So first we are prompting the user to enter the total number of elements, that is the length of the array. And then I am calling the next int function to take input from the user and store it into this variable size. Then I am creating an array called elements. There are two ways to create an array. You can either do this, it is perfectly fine, or the preferred Java way is create it like this. So this is how you create arrays. And I am creating an array of this length, whatever will be the size. And here I am calling the inputting function. So I am calling the inputting function and I am passing it the array, our array. So let's see what is our inputting function. So here is our inputting function. Let's see what it's doing. So here, let's see. First, I've created an object of the scanner class. Remember, each method has its own variables and objects. That's why I need to create it again here for this method. So this is accessible only in this method. And then I'm running a for loop from 0 to length minus 1, since our first index is 0 and our last is at length minus 1. And you can also do, instead of doing that, you can also do less than equal to length minus 1. That will also work fine, but since we know that it will go up to length minus 1, that's why I'm using the less than sign. And I am incrementing I by after each iteration. Here I am asking the user to enter num, let's call it enter element, and then I'm calling the input dot next int function, and which is obviously storing getting the input. And after reading the input, and which is an integer, it is storing that integer into the uh, I variable, into this I index, sorry, I x array of the I index. So now our function has done completed. Now it will exit, and now we will have our modified array, and now elements won't be empty anymore. It will have all the elements that were inputted in that function. Since arrays are passed by references, their values are modified into the main method also. Even though we are not returning here, the values will still be modified. Now this is our logic for calculating the max element. So for now I have assumed that my element at the zeroth index is max, whatever it is, right? It could be any element. Then I'm running a for loop from 0 to length minus 1, or size length main, the same thing here. Since we have length stored into the size variable, you can also use the elements dot length function. And I'm checking each element. I'm going through the whole array. So here I have condition. I'm checking that if element size is greater than max, that if any element of this array is greater than this element, which is our max for now. Suppose our max is, let's suppose our max is 55, right? Our zeroth element is 55, and our now it will run a loop. First it will check that the element at zeroth index, which is 55, is greater than max, and our max is also 55. So is 55 greater than 55? No, they are equal. So this is not false, therefore this if won't be executed, and the loop will go on and it will increment I. Now I is 1. Now let's suppose that 65 is stored into I, or let's say 44 was stored into I. So now it will check is at the first index we are supposing that 44 is stored. Now it will check is 44 greater than 55. No, that's not greater than 55. Therefore, max will remain the same. This statement won't be executed, and our loop will go through the next iteration. Now I is 2. Now it will see that is second index element greater than in the element in index 2 greater than max. So suppose 88 is stored at second index. So we will see that 88 is greater than 55. Yes, it is true. 85 is greater than 55. Now the value of max will be element side. That is whatever is the value here. In that case, 88. So now 88 is stored into this max variable, right? So now we got a new max. In the next iteration, suppose the value at third index is 10. Is 10 greater than 88? No, that's not true. So max will remain 88. So this value will only change if element greater than the existing element has been found. Suppose, and this will go on as long as array has some elements. As soon as array is uh, finished, all elements have been gone through, all elements have been checked, this loop will exit, and then we will print whatever is the max value. So also now let's look at the minimum. So this is how max part. Now let's look at the minimum part. So minimum elements, I'm doing the exact same logic here. I'm assuming that elements 0, index 0 element is my minimum element. I'm assuming that. Then I'm running a for loop from I to size minus 1, that is to iterate through the whole array. Then in that case, instead of checking greater, I am checking less than. So if any less than element is found, it will be stored into minimum, and this will be checked in the whole array. Each element will be checked, and if any element which is smaller than minimum, which is initially this element at the 0th index, if any element is found, then it will be stored into the min variable. So in that case, we will be able to check and store if any minimum is found in the whole array. And then we are simply printing our min. So now let's run our program. So let's enter the total element. Let's enter 6 elements. And let's enter the first element as 55, second as 44, third as 88, fourth as 10, fifth as 19, and sixth as 23. So as you can see, it is telling us that our max is 88 and our min is 10. So we have found maximum and minimum in our array. So our program is working perfectly. And uh, one more thing we can do, instead of our program is perfect, it works perfectly, our logic is accurate, but we can beautify it more, we can make it more efficient. Instead of writing these functions, instead of writing this code, we can enclose this piece of code into function. So let's remove the code from here, and let's create a new function which finds and returns the max element. So the advantage of returning is that you can use it in other calculation. You can, if you simply have to print the max value, you can use void, but if you want to return, you have to use int. So I'm using int here, and then I'm calling it max or maximum. Let's call it maximum, and I'm passing in the array which will be checked. So let's call it elements, or you can give it any name. Let's call it x. So now let's call it element, since we will have to change the names again. You can call it x as well. For example, here I have called it x. Remember, each method has its own variables. So here I am checking max. Here I need to declare max variable. I am initially calling it 0. And instead of printing the max value, we will return the max value. So I'm gonna return the max. So instead of doing size, since we don't know the size of this array, we can easily get it by using x dot elements dot length. So this is what we need to change. Similarly, let's make a minimum function. So minimum function, we can simply copy it, since it will be the exact same thing except from few parameters. It will be minimum now. You can give it any name, right? And this variable will be min. I can still call it max, but I'm calling it min for your convenience, for a better understanding. We will have to change the sign here, and we have to return this min, and we can remove this piece of code. Now we have the function ready, we can call them. So let's first call the maximum function. Similarly, let's call the minimum function, and we are passing our array into this function. So now we have max our and min, but we also need to assign an integer to it, since this returning result will be stored into this integer. Whatever integer we will have here, the returning value will be stored here. Similarly, let's store the returning value of this into min. Then we can simply print those by system.out.println. Max is plus max. Similarly, we have to do the same thing for min. You can simply copy it. So let's run our program real quick. So as you can see, our code is a lot more cleaner and efficient. It is doing exactly what it looks like to be. Let's enter 4 elements. Let's enter 77, 0, -8, and 44. So as you can see, it is giving us the maximum and minimum, which is -8 here. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.